What a ride. All your movies. So intense. They get it, you get it, and just keep working it, and it's an intense ride. It's fabulous. Your father was a stockbroker.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the inspiration behind it, as well as the changes in the Wall Street that were going on in the 1980s. There were several insider trader busts at the time. And also I have to say that young people who I knew from my generation, I was about 40 years old, but I was meeting people, which is young, and I was meeting people in their 30s and making a fortune, which never happened before because the money was always tight in America. But this was in a situation that was very bizarre. I mean, I knew, and they were doing not only, I had come right from Scarface up to New York, so you realize I knew the cocaine crowd down there, and they were insane in terms of what they were spending, and buying motorboats and apartments and real estate and jewelry and tons of cocaine, and then coming up to New York and finding that to a certain degree there was the same culture, that they were using cocaine and that they were, young people were talking like insane stuff, like, you know, like they're talking in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he made, 25 million last year, and this, I just couldn't believe it, and it was like, what's going on? And that culture was going through this big change, and I started to realize it making the movie, because New York was jumping, the clubs were jumping, the whole concept of buying tables, buying bottles. I mean, it was all starting. The music was pretty...
A culture of excess.
What?
A culture of excess.
Yeah.
I remember...
Celebration of it. And I had no experience of that. I mean, I come from the Vietnam War, and people work for a living. Like Marty Sheen. All of a sudden you can make money speculating, which had always been looked down on by my father's generation.
Mm-hmm. So what was the, I remember around this time, there was a woman who was the French finance minister who later became, I believe, head of the International Monetary Fund. I'm trying to remember her name.
Lagarde.
Yeah.
L-E-G.
Who made a comment, and she said, well, as I was growing up in the finance business, the job of financial services was to provide financial services. And she said, now it's just get close to the money and take as much of it as you can. I mean, that was essentially what she said. She said that when I began my career in the financial services business, the job was to provide financial services. But now it's get yourself as close to the money and take as much of it as you can.
Well, that's pretty irresponsible. As the older broker, Hal Holbrook, says in the movie, the purpose of Wall Street that my father went into in 1935 was to create, it was the engine of the American economy. And it was to lend money, to provide money to manufacturing and research. R&D was crucial, and all these companies seemed to be having a purpose, and they were using the Wall Street to get credit.
Right.
And that somehow was changing.
Right. So that money was stock values were related to productivity. The money was used to enhance productivity. And it became essentially a gambling circle where it was speculate, bet, get inside information, play the numbers.
Well, yeah, but it's complicated, and you saw that in the, I guess I tried to show that in the negotiation. For example, in the apartment, when Gecko was making his proposal on what he's going to save the company, and
right.
It's complicated by all the numbers, and it's not that simple to understand. It's the guys who gamble like that don't generally do that well. You have to be smart, and you need information. Information is power.
Of course, this was around the time when the exporting of American manufacturing jobs was also increasing, and where profitability was based on being able to find new labor markets where very cheap labor would enhance company value and obviously stock value as well, yes? And this was NAFTA was probably, what, 90, when was NAFTA, 94, 95? The NAFTA agreement that resulted in a lot of...
NAFTA was Bill Clinton, that was about in the 90s. That
yeah,
was,
right, so this was before
that. Was a little later. This is already the beginning. They hollowed out they were hollowing out the manufacturing sector during the Vietnam War. It was in the 70s. This all started, and I mean, the concept, I was over in Vietnam. It was so crazy. We were spending so much money in Vietnam, and America started to go crazy about deficits. We were financing a war that was complete waste of men, power, energy, and for, I don't know, what did we get out of it? Nothing. And in that period, the manufacturing and the whole productivity of America started to change. It's come back to some degree with the technical, what do you call it, the computer, so forth, revolution. Sure. But it's not the same, and the farms, so everything is changing. I'm not an expert in economics, but I learned as much as I could, and it's very depressing when you consider where the country took a hit because of Vietnam, and it continued. And you know, right now we're spending another fortune on another 2 wars.
Yeah. So.
And the idea is, of course, it's okay when the money comes back. Bullshit. It's going into the military-industrial complex, which is good for America. That's not good. Any economic study you do, it's not productive, war. But
right.
Except for some people.
You do better to manufacture a fast train than to spend that amount of money producing what essentially is weapons that destroy stuff, which then has to be rebuilt, which is another question. But anyway, so the Hal Holbrook character for you sort of represented your father's values and the world that he inhabited.
And Martin Sheen's values too. They were good men. They worked for a living. Mm-hmm. I can't say my father ever got rich off Wall Street. No, he didn't. But he did a good job, and he advised people well, and he wrote about it, and he was very, very intelligent about it, and understood Wall Street. And he was always admired for that.
Did he get to see the film?
Huh?
Did he see the film?
No, he passed away just before we made it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good reason to make it.
I think Michael Douglas's background up to this point was mostly television, yes? But he had done some film before this? Michael Douglas?
Yeah, he had produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which got him a Best Picture. So he was quite, and he made Romancing the Stone and a few other movies. He was very successful. It was considered light comedy. This was the first role he took on that was really pure drama, and he surprised people.
Yeah.
There was a tremendous amount of goodwill for Michael because of his father, who never got an Oscar nomination. Or he got a nomination, but he never won an Oscar. His father, of course, Kirk Douglas, had done great work and contributed greatly to the movie. So there was great goodwill for Michael. And surprisingly, we were shocked because it was a supporting role to begin with. And as you know, he went all the way. Best Picture. Yeah. Best Actor, which is a serious award and helps the film economically.
Sure. So, I think that he really comes into his own. I mean, he has a charisma and a stature and a sort of complexity to his character that plays pretty well.
Yeah, Michael had problems at first. That was kind of known, but he had never done this kind of depth of dialogue and, a lot of vocabulary. And once he buckled down and he learned the lines, he was ready. Mm-hmm. And he did great after that.
You can read the subtext. You co-wrote the script. What was your process in co-writing?
Oh, it was crazy. Stanley, who went to NYU in my class, NYU Film School, we were talking back and forth. He would do a draft. Then I would take the draft, and it went back and forth like ping pong, and it went very fast and we were going to the brokers on the street. Of course, we had advisors, and these people are very smart, and they helped us they helped us greatly. But I knew what I wanted to do, which was I really wanted to bring a sense of the war, the tension that I felt to the street. So bringing, in a sense, a new generation of that energy and the sense of combat that these guys they're not soldiers, but they go into the trenches every day and they fight.
Yeah.
And they kill.
Yeah, the intensity of it.
They kill with money.
Seeing the floor, the action of trying to sell, up, down. I mean, it's enough to make you crazy.
Well, there's a lot of death of a salesman feeling there too.
Sure.
That is the American. You remember the play, right?
Sure. Yeah.
If you don't sell in America, you're dead meat.
Yeah. No. Okay. So actually, we have Heidi. Are you here? Yeah. Yeah. Heidi, why don't you come up for a second? We're just going to talk.
Oh, Heidi Levitt was our associate casting at that point, and she went on to become one of my casting agents. And she tell us about what you witnessed, Heidi.
Well, on Wall Street was one of the first movies that Wall Street was one of the first movies that I ever worked on. And what I think about in terms of casting for Wall Street... You can't hear me? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, why don't you sit in my seat?
Maybe you can hear me better here. What I remember is that a lot of the beginning of finding real people. Like, that's one thing that we often talk about in casting is, I mean, we love actors and we want actors, but then there's this authenticity. And I went to Wall Street and went on the floor, and I remember meeting all these traders, and even like you had Richard Feigen in it. There was a lot of characters of reality that give texture to your movie. And that's a lot of what you want in every movie that I ever worked on with you, was finding great actors and finding authenticity. And that was like sort of the first time that I got to do that. I did that for you a lot more later on with Heaven and Earth, spending a year looking for Vietnamese actors to be in a movie when there were very few Vietnamese actors at all in America, and the leads of that movie were a lot of non-actors.
In there's about at least a dozen brokers in the film.
Yeah.
And in the art world, there's quite a few artists.
Yeah, you have Rosenquist.
And Sylvia Miles is Sylvia Miles.
Sylvia Miles was the
I want to make the point that, it wasn't, I'd finished Platoon and we were rushing, and Tom Cruise wanted to do this. And, I keep thinking about that because Tom was extremely, let's call him super muscular about it, and he would have been a very aggressive trader. It would have been very interesting. But because I had to wait for him, and there was a possibility of a major strike, we moved ahead in that month, and he was on Rain Man, so we couldn't use him. And I used Charlie because I had worked with him on Platoon, and he received, I think, a fair amount of criticism. But I liked his performance because it's kind of what Charlie is. It's a dreamy. It reminded me of Montgomery Clift he looks a bit like him in Place in the Sun. So I stuck with Charlie, and at times, it was difficult, but it was a difficult film to make because I had never worked in New York under those conditions with a big union picture for a major studio. That was quite something.
Right, it was the first time also that you were working with women like that and getting performances from Daryl Hannah, and it was challenging. They had not been in this kind of format on a large movie like this, and you hadn't had that many characters that were women before.
You live and learn.
Yeah.
I made another film, another Wall Street film 20 years later, which I think is very interesting because it deals really with the 2008 crash. You said it was shot pre-crash. No, it was shot after the crash in 2010. But we had tremendous amount of information about that crash. What a story! The 2008 story tops the 1987 story because it's more at stake. We have bankers, we have Federal Reserve Board, we have the essence of the American economy at stake. So if you ever have a chance to see Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, I think it's a more advanced piece of the research on Wall Street if you're interested in it, with some very good characters in it. Michael Douglas is now an older Gecko, but very interesting story with his daughter. And Josh Brolin plays a new kind of monster.
Yeah, and Shia.
Yeah. It was nice to have Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen together. I mean, Martin, I think, is very good in the film. Martin is very good in the film, Martin Sheen.
What about it?
He's great.
Yeah, I like him very much.
I mean, he still has some of that Badlands sort of quality in his character also. I mean, a sort of, very earthy, just where he comes from.
That's Marty. Marty's very much, I almost, Marty is a very straight, he's wonderfully straight. And that really, I had him when I was making Salvador in a few years before this. He was, for some reason, I ended up with him as my, he was going to be the lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you ever, if you saw Salvador, you understand that it's not a moral character at all. It's a very amoral character. So Jimmy Woods comes up, and he came in originally for the Jimmy Belushi, for the second role, Dr. Rock, the sidekick. And Jimmy convinced me that you're going to use Martin Sheen as this scumbag. And he convinced me, and I said, well, yeah, of course he's right. And we ended up using Jimmy for the main role. But Marty, I owed Marty, and I put him in this. Very happy because he brought up the whole company when he came on. He brought up the performances. He made everybody around him look good. And he's a wonderful actor. But I loved his scene with his son in the elevator when they're going at it. And of course, the heart attack mimics, to some degree, the Apocalypse Now heart attack that the father had, for real, on the location. And Charlie was there and saw that.
Yeah, where Francis Ford Coppola is quoted in the documentary Hearts of Darkness by his wife, with Coppola saying, this was after Martin Sheen's heart attack, "I don't care if he's dead. He's not dead till I say he's dead." Which slipped out to the press. Anyway, before we go to a question, so Heidi, you also worked on Nixon, right?
Yes.
And so, can you just give us a sample of what some of that casting was like? And if Oliver, you're willing to just talk a little bit about the casting on Nixon.
I don't know if they know the movie, but
who knows the movie Nixon? Anybody?
I don't know if it's.
Okay. We'll just take 3 minutes.
Listen, I struggled to get that made because Anthony Hopkins was not box office, but I knew he was the right one choice because he's a great actor, and I sensed everything about Nixon was in him that I wanted.
In Anthony Hopkins.
So I stuck with it, and we got it made miraculously, and we had a great cast around it.
Joan Allen was in it as Patricia Nixon.
Joan Allen, yeah. And a whole bunch of Jimmy Woods was great.
Ed Harris. There was a really great ensemble in that movie that we had. But what was also interesting is that you trusted that instinct about, we talked for a long time about a lot of potential Nixons. Do you remember when we cast Joan Allen? She came in and you were talking to Warren Beatty, and we spent like 2 hours.
Yeah, sure.
And he was contemplating Nixon. Warren Beatty was pontificating for 2 hours. And Joan Allen was sitting there, and we were going to read her. But then you knew from having her sit there that she could be Pat Nixon, and she was brilliant. And obviously, ultimately, it was a great combination with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, do we have questions from the audience at all? Yes, right here.
Thank you. I'm mystified because I was at Goldman at that time, and there was not anything from what I know that you didn't get right. You nailed it. And not having been on Wall Street, I don't understand how you got it all. You said you had technical advisors, but I'm mystified.
How did you get the authenticity of being on Wall Street?
Well,
let's change our seats for a second.
We had help. We have Ken Lipper, who was in the film was one of the big shots at Goldman Sachs, and then he was deputy mayor. He did, he was helpful, but there was so many other people in the film too who were naturally brokers. Jeff Beck is a character who made the Wall Street Journal because he was a total fraud, but he convinced me that he was the real thing. He worked for Drexel Burnham. What was the name of the guy? Mike Milken. He worked for Milken. So he told me that whole story, and he was quite something. And he's the guy who was screaming in the board meeting about what's wrong. Why don't we make a deal? We're going to sell off. We're going to cannibalize Blue Star Airlines. He was very good, but he was. He told me he'd been in Vietnam. All that stuff was totally fraudulent, and he was outed in the Wall Street Journal. It was quite some story. But there are people like that in Wall Street. They just make up these backgrounds and they show up and they somehow rent apartments on Park Avenue and they give big parties and they spend big and they get it's a con, it becomes a, well, I guess Matt Madoff, everybody knows about that story. It's very much a New York story.
Yeah. Now, I think that, one of the similarities to Platoon is this propulsive action, but with a great deal of naturalism and verisimilitude. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we tried to do that. This was it was the last time I abandoned the idea. I mean, this is the son of two fathers. It's kind of like, because it's Charlie Sheen, and people would say, well, that's Stone's theme. That's not my theme. That was for those two movies. I went on to other themes.
Sure.
But, there was a lot of condescension. I knew I would be in for it. You can't make a Best Picture and then turn around the next year, shoot out something like this. You're going to get killed by the critics. I mean, that's their nature.
Good.
They give and they take away. So I knew I was in for it, and I was braced for it. But I was quite surprised by Michael Douglas. That was great. And I'm very happy that he got the attention he did. And it helped our film enormously. Because, I have to realize that Fox, they were very strange. I was just, production executive left in the middle, and Barry Diller was the head of running the company for Murdoch. And Barry Diller is very much a Wall Street guy, and he'd never seen a movie that had been so extreme about Wall Street, and of course his interests are there. So it was kind of interesting. I never knew if they were with me or against me, but they had their quality picture that year was Broadcast News. Broadcast News was a very good film. It came out a week after us, and that was where their money was. 10 theaters, a limited release, big publicity push, wonderful actors, and they ended up making about as much money as we did, but we ended up with an Oscar. They had 6 or 7 nominations and had 0 wins, so it was kind of interesting to see that we were kind of the underdog at Fox.
Yeah. All right, other questions? Yes.
Hi. Auteur directors sometimes have an avatar in their actor, like Tim Burton might have an avatar in Johnny Depp, or David Lynch might have an avatar in Kyle MacLachlan. Christopher Nolan might have an avatar in Leonardo DiCaprio. Do you feel that Charlie Sheen around that time might have been kind of like an avatar for you? And if
avatar,
so,
yeah, that's a very strong word, avatar. Yeah, why not?
If so, was he more or less an avatar than Arnold Schwarzenegger and Conan the Barbarian?
Well, maybe we should, not push this too far.
Charlie, I like Charlie very much. We had 2 films together, but it was clear that towards the end of Wall Street that it was not working for me with him. He liked the sins too much. He liked it, and he partied hard. I mean, so that's the nature of young men and women. And we had a lot of fun in New York, but he was sagging towards the end, and I a little lazy, but he did his job. I mean, he knew the lines. He never showed up without knowing his lines, and he is he was a very dependable actor. And if you look at his other performances, you'll see that decade he did okay. He did okay. He was making a fortune on 2.5 Men. And nobody got paid the amount of money he got paid. So he got by with his talents over the years. Unfortunately, got a bad rap, you know. But that was not the reason I didn't work with him. I put him in Wall Street Money Never Sleeps as a cameo.
Yeah, right. Other questions? Yeah.
I would just love to hear about how your father's work stories from Wall Street made it into your life and then the movie.
How did your father's work stories make it into your life and into the movie?
Only in the sense that the morality of it, only in that sense. And my father was very much like the Holbrook character when McGinley says, oh, he's still, would you like to come in here at that age and still be pitching? There was that quality in those later years when he was working for much younger people who were ruthless. And he ended up working for the guy who, the famous, I forgot his name now, Jesus Christ. He owned everything. He merged stock brokerage firms with Travelers Insurance. What was his name? Anybody remember? He was very well known. All the he made insurance companies and he merged them with
Sandy Weil.
Sandy Weil. He worked for Sandy. He was very nice to him, but you know, it was just a whole other world for my father. They all of a sudden brokerage commissions got cut, and these mergers and computerization, of course, it was all changing. It's very hard, and we all know from our own lives when things change, and you have to you adjust in America, and it goes very fast sometimes, right?
So was your next film after this, Born on the 4th of July? Was your next film Born on the 4th of July after this?
No, I did. I was waiting for Tom Cruise again because he was still doing Rain Man, but we ended up doing talk radio, which was a very
small film.
Low budget. Yeah, we did it in 30 days as a warm up, as an exercise, because it was very technical and very, very complicated little film. Talk radio.
Yeah, so talk radio, which yes was based on a one-man play.
Yes.
By Eric Bogosian. Yeah. And so after talk radio, you did Born on the 4th of July.
We went into Born on the 4th of July. We shot both films in Dallas because, so we got to know Dallas, and we used the tremendous, they have a very good casting base in Dallas. Hundreds of people, very talented, the Texas mentality is very extrovert, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then JFK as the next film?
No, Doors.
Doors, yeah.
And then JFK
Which
back.
was a whole other
So you were making like 6 films a year at this point.
No, we made 10 films in 10 years.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious. Other questions? Then you made a series of crime films. U-Turn.
Natural Born Killers and Savages.
And Savages, yeah.
Crime films.
Yeah. So, what was the inspiration to sort of change course?
Change course? No, it was just a relaxation. You know, I like crime.
You like crime? Good.
All Americans like gangsters. I mean, come on, we are a gangster culture.
Yeah. Excellent. Anybody else have a question here? Yes.
Yes, so it had been a while since I'd seen the movie, and I'm not a filmmaker, but just as a film goer, it really struck me the dramatic use of lighting. Like there's a couple scenes when Charlie Sheen literally walks into a very bright light and disappears. And then there's a couple other scenes, like when Michael Douglas tells him to dump the stock, you bring the light down completely and he's in the dark. I just thought those were really bold moves, especially from just a spectator point of view. Can you comment on that at all?
The use of light in the film and how light and dark scenes and the contrast in the mood that was affected by them. Any thoughts?
Well, there's a better version of this. It's just that, you know,
Yeah.
You know, I made 20 feature films. I sometimes lose track of what we have, and this needs a 4K. There's so much more detail. It's so much richer in the shadows. And, it's, you know, I have to live with the technology of the time, but now that we have 4Ks, you know, I'm trying to get back and get them all redone. This needs it. But as to, yeah, there's a lot of night work because that's where he's in the shadows. And certainly sex plays a role in this thing, and that's a major factor in Wall Street. I love New York at night. I'm a New Yorker, you know. What else is it? A great city. It's a great night. It used to be a great night city, and it's kind of calmed down now, and it's kind of dull, I hear.
Yeah. There's a kind of rock and roll energy to a number of your pictures, and is that something that you thought of at all in terms of that sense of? I mean, there's a '60s edge to the kind of rock and roll that, you know.
No, Stuart Copeland did the score. I fired Jerry Goldsmith, which you never do. You don't fire. He's an institution, but we never got along, and that was big when I got rid of him. So Stuart jumped in,
right?
From the police.
From the police, right?
He did the score very fast in 6 weeks, and then David Byrne. I went to David, and we actually, these were needle drops. I loved his music. We put it in.
Sure, right.
But he didn't write any music for the movie. But he loved what he heard,
Mm-hmm.
so he gave us permission.
Yeah, but the action of the scenes, the energy of them. When you look at the floor of the stockbroker, you know, the whole energy of the film has a rock, which also Platoon is true. Also true of Platoon.
Stock Exchange. Actually, we're the first film I think ever. I don't think maybe since, but to get on the stock exchange floor, and they let us on for 1 hour during the shooting act, during the training day, and then we stayed on after hours and finished. But those guys are real brokers, and you get a sense of the chaos not the chaos, the control energy. Really, they are very smart people. And a lot of them were vets too. So I got tremendous cooperation. They're focused, you know. That's a tough job, all day to be on the floor. Your feet hurt. You have to be very attentive.
Yeah. Well, probably your feet are starting to hurt also. This is your fourth episode with us. This is your fourth discussion. You've been very generous.
I hope the sound was okay in here. These rooms are a little wooden, a
Sure.
little echoey. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.